triangle step is used to transition from fighting stance to neutral stance, where the chest is facing forward and the feet are placed side by side at about shoulder's width.
Offensive, I'm in neutral stance.
Watch the feet, Bazooka Joe triangle steps from fighting position into a neutral stance. So first of all, why is this called a triangle step? This is a fighting stance. Notice the lead foot is turned in slightly to face the opponent's center line. The rear foot is angled out at about 45 degrees. And if we trace the line down the middle between these two feet, we would see a proper heel-toe alignment, which means the toe of the lead foot and the heel of the rear foot would both be resting on that center line. To initiate the triangle step from here, an orthodox fighter would begin to rotate the back foot counterclockwise, which pulls the lead foot, hip, and shoulder back towards parallel. The lead foot ends up next to the rear foot at about shoulder's width. And as we see with the 3 points in this diagram, our foot movement creates the shape of a triangle. But why? Why would you ever step out of your fighting stance in a fight? Why is Floyd triangle stepping? Why is Muhammad Ali triangle stepping? Why is Canelo triangle stepping? I'll spare you any more examples like this, but I want to get across the point that triangle stepping is something that fighters do at the highest level, and they do it consciously. It's not a mistake or a bad habit. So why do they do it? What is there to gain? The only good reason to step out of fighting stance in a fight is to momentarily step out of the fight. And that's what the triangle step does. By moving into neutral stance and rotating the lead foot, shoulder, and hip back to parallel with the rear foot, you move directly away from your opponent and step into the hyper-mobile neutral stance. Understand the pros and cons. You're giving up a fighting position. You're giving up leverage, especially on the rear hand. You're squaring up with your opponent, which makes you a big target with poor front-to-back shock absorption and stability. And you're not fully out of range because the back foot didn't move. But you gain exceptional side-to-side mobility. You can just look at other sports. When athletes need to move quickly sideways while still facing their target, it's usually done in the form of a quick lateral shuffle from a neutral stance. You also gain great stepping options from neutral stance. With your feet side by side, you can basically step into any stance from any direction, so you become very unpredictable. Your opponent has no way of telling if you're about to take off with lateral movement to the left or right, or step back into a southpaw stance, because after all, this is the natural path to stance switching if you go step by step, or just step back into orthodox and explode with punches. And it doesn't completely compromise your defense. Sure, you don't have that back leg in place to give you shock absorption as you block punches, but you can still keep your hands up or out if you prefer one of the long guard options we've discussed in previous videos, and your lateral mobility is going to make it very hard for your opponent to line up those straight shots. And you won't need to defend for long because this is a movement stance, not a fighting stance. After a second or two, you'll be out of range. As long as you understand these pros and cons, the triangle step is a great way to step out of the fight. And what you do with that space is up to you. You can cut laterally down the ropes and reset across the ring in a much better position, like Floyd and like Ali. You can step into an outside pivot and change the angle, like Canelo. You can get your opponent chasing you, draw them in, juking left and right, then set up for a big punch, or just take a breather, make a read, whatever you need to do. Okay, so this is definitely an advanced technique, but while we're on the topic of the triangle step, I just want to mention you can also triangle step while punching. And you can do this with either hand, but I find it's much more natural doing it with the rear hand because I can use the weight transfer, which would normally settle onto my lead leg and hip, to pull that side into neutral. And you can actually get some decent pop on this punch, but I would not make power your primary objective here. Your goal is really just to cover the step that you're taking. So you're occupying your opponent with that punch, and that's buying you the time you need to step the foot back, create that space, and then follow up with whichever option you choose. In this case, Mayweather's doing a really smart thing. He's choosing to exit out of the corner that Cotto had him trapped in by moving laterally left down the ropes. To make that happen, he's throwing the rear uppercut, using that weight shift to triangle step back to neutral, and then using that extended right hand to control Cotto's head and create defensive traffic as he moves down the ropes. So that's it for today's video, guys. The triangle step isn't flashy, but it's a fundamental footwork tool that's used by all your favorite action fighters. So if you want to hit and not get hit, the triangle step deserves a place in your training. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and let us know what you want to see next in the comments section. Thanks, guys.